Okay, this is your very last cosmic dance ever. So, I've got one or two questions I want to answer first of all, and there was one from Karen. You asked if I could talk about the shadow in relation to this model. It's a really good and riveting question. With this model, non-dual model, you always start right up at the top. So you start with the unity of everything. You don't start down the bottom with being a separate entity. So you start, if you're using this model, from the point of view of everything being a manifestation of oneness. So you're like the wise ant in the Rumi story who said that writing is caused by the universal spirit that gives movement to all things. So then you sort of move down and you can start to look at the mechanism within that context. So in that context, everything that happens is total precision and part of the dancing of the one. So that's the idea you have to get in your novel first of all. And then you can really look at any phenomena from that point of view. And with the word the shadow, it's a concept, I think it was used by both Freud and Jung. And just as a note, we actually had Freud's great-grandson was a Turner here a few years ago, just as a byword.
Freud grandson.
Yeah, and his father was Lucian Freud, the artist. So, in the causal body, though I haven't gone into much detail in it, it actually has two parts to it, and one part is the total stillness, the great emptiness of deep sleep, and the other part is what's like an enfolded blueprint or wound up movie film. And in Indian philosophy they call that samskara. So it's like all your potential and everything else is enfolded at a deep level, but as yet unmanifest. And as you go through life, it gradually manifests out down here. And the way samskara is created is mostly by repetition. So in your life, if you do something often enough and you have a particular repetitive habit, you do it so often that eventually it becomes automatic and it goes into your nature at that level. So your nature at that level is totally hidden and you're completely unaware of it except to the degree that it manifests down through your psyche and your physical body. So it happens often quite early in life. You'll have experiences early in childhood which sometimes they're very traumatic, and they're almost so traumatic that you push them away and try to forget about them, and that's called disassociation. But this trauma or traumatic experience is there deep in your nature, in your samskara, hidden, and unconsciously it can affect your life as you go through life. And you'll find in your life that you keep getting in repetitive situations, or your ability to be happy keeps getting sabotaged by a recurring situation. And that's because something's gone on. You've had some trauma, often very early in life, and you've become disassociated from it, and yet it's still there deep in your nature, affecting your unfolding in the movie of life. And that's really the role of psychotherapy, is if something is sabotaging your happiness repeatedly, then you often need to find a therapist who will help to shine light, and you'll come to the realization yourself of what it is that is affecting you at this deep level. And that's really what the shadow is. It's some unresolved or unexpressed trauma which has become internalized, and you've also disassociated from it, so you no longer perceive it, and yet it affects your pursuit of happiness and your role in the movie of life. And the role of therapy is just to bring it into the light, because as it's a shadow, it's completely unconscious, so you're completely unaware of it. And also with the shadow, you tend to project it outwards onto other people. So if something in another person really, really annoys you, it's probably your own shadow reflected in the other person. So Rumi says, the evil we see in other people is our own nature reflected in them. So if you have a very trusting nature, you normally see the good in everyone else. You never suspect them of doing wicked things. But if you yourself do wicked things, then you are very ready to see the same thing in other people. So you suspect other people of doing terrible things. So for instance, if you never lie to people, you go through life initially thinking that everyone else is like you and tells the truth completely. When you discover sometimes that you are being lied to, then it often comes as a great shock, and you start to get much wiser around that. So it's like your nature at that level is everyone else is like a mirror to you, reflecting back what you can't see. But with trauma, deep trauma, which is deeply hidden away and unresolved, it's good either if you're going through life and you're really happy, then no problem, there's nothing to fix. But if your happiness is eluding you, then there might either be a need for a professional therapist or a really good friend who you can process all sorts of your life experiences with. Having a really good friend who you can do that with is really important. And just to take a sort of practical example of the shadow, say you were a young girl and you had been physically abused by an older man when you were very young, and then that gets disassociated from, and it goes deep into your samskara. Then throughout your life, unconsciously, you might get in a repetitive situation where you go through your life trying to punish older men. And I've seen that on a number of occasions happening. And I've seen it the other way around, where it's a man who has suffered abuse and they're punishing women. So it's like you get in this repetitive program which just goes on and on and on until you have to come to the realization yourself that you want something different, and you want happiness, and you want to get out of this repetitive situation. And then you start to look inwards, and then you seek professional help. And as I said, the role of the therapist is to shine light onto the trauma. And once it's seen, once the light is shone on it, then it's no longer unconscious, and it can no longer control you. It only controls you because you can't see it and you're unaware of it, and it's completely unconscious. In running the dervish group, Helen and I have our work cut out, because sometimes you get people who come into the group who do have unresolved trauma at that level, and the trauma is then projected outwards into the group, and chaos often ensues, and you almost have to try and help, almost corral the person and try and see if you can get them to perhaps have therapy and realise what they're actually doing and what's happening and what the cause of it is. And another thing you have to watch out for in that is some people with trauma at this level can use spiritual practice to squash it down. So in some cases spiritual practice isn't a good thing for people if first of all they actually need to do psychotherapeutic work before spiritual practice. And Rumi has a wonderful story about it in the Masnavi, and it's about how there's all these animals in the forest, and this lion, big fierce lion, used to come along and keep eating them. And eventually the animals decided to get together because it was so traumatic being pounced on by a big lion. And each week one of the animals they'd draw lots, and one of the animals would have to go and meet the lion in a specific place to be eaten by it. And then it came the turn of this particular hare, and the hare was a very crafty and clever hare, so he decided he was going to put a stop to this practice of being eaten by lions. So he went to the lion, and he arrived late, and when he arrived at the lion's den, the lion was really angry, and the hare said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, it just so happened there were two of us, there were two hares, and we set out to come and be eaten by you, and then we met this other, even bigger lion than you, and he ate the other hare, and I managed to get away, and I've come to you." And the lion was so enraged, he said, "Take me to this other lion, and I'll deal with him." So the crafty hare took the lion back, and he took the lion to a well, which was in the forest, and the hare said, "The lion is down that well." So the lion and the hare both looked over the rim of the well, and sure enough, looking back up at them from the bottom was another lion and another hare. And the lion was so enraged that he jumped into the well to destroy the other lion, and that was the end of the lion. So that's a good metaphor for your unresolved stuff. And so we're all mirrors to each other. Any questions on that or developments? Because the trauma can get locked into, unresolved trauma can also get locked into the physical body. They all have particular symptoms, and once the trauma is released, the physical symptom also disappears.
Do you have psychiatrists that you'd recommend?
I don't personally, but what I would suggest is there are so many different systems of psychiatry and psychology. You'd want one, if you were me, which had the whole model and brought this bit in as well. Because if you just had a reductionist, say Freudian model, as I understand it, it's all really based around this. But you need a model that includes part of you which is beyond trauma, or you're very much sort of stuck in a bit of a vicious circle down here. So I know there's one type, several friends of mine did something called psychosynthesis, which they told me was psychotherapy, but psychotherapy with a spiritual dimension.
Stan Grof? Stan Grof?
I don't know. Is he?
No, that's thinking you know.
I'm not an expert on things. I'm only a textile designer.
There is something that's recent that integration.
Integral psychology.
Psychotherapy. But they have a thing here.
Yeah, great. So you need that top level, because ultimately the top level is sort of the thing that cures you. But if you don't know about that, you just get in a repetitive cycle down in your psychology.
I sort of had an something that was almost in everybody, that you've got these sort of dark and light parts of yourselves. And I mean, you're talking about a certain trauma or something that might have gone on, but to me it seems that everybody has inhabiting in them these dark light sides.
I don't know that they have. I think some people I've met, it's almost like there are bits of your life, and if there are bits of your life you need to keep separate from each other, you can't put it all together, then it's like there are hidden bits, so there is darkness, using the metaphor of darkness. Other people, I find the whole of life, their lives are integrated, and nothing is sort of in a separate little box somewhere. Though I've met lots of people here and elsewhere where you suddenly discover there's this whole sort of secret bit which is hidden away from everyone else and guarded very closely, and suddenly you get a glimpse of it. But I've met other people who are so openly transparent that there seems to be nothing hidden.
I'm sure that's true.
I also think when you do something like yoga or turning, and you're working specifically the body and the breath, like with yoga, it's the same thing. You're unifying. So when you're working in union, you're unifying all aspects of the self, and you're going through that model. And it's the same with turning. You become a transparent vehicle. And I always know that in the middle of the training we are going to get big hiccups, because somebody, and it happened in this training, there's a lot of emotional process. So it's the process is of being cleaned out, and you're becoming a more clear, transparent vehicle. So you're shining light, and you're removing or polishing or taking away some of the darker aspects of your being and psyche. But sometimes that might not take you all the way, or you might need to verbally process what is going on for you. I worked myself with a therapist for a long time, and he would want, and I did a lot of body work, I'm a trained body worker, so you process, you would have an experience and you talk about it because you verbalize it, and you hear your own story, so you shine light, you hear the things that you didn't normally say, but you've kept hidden away. I kept stuff hidden away, and it's like I had to take it out of the box and look at it, and then once I did that, once I processed some of that pain, I could then put it to bed. It was no longer taking over my life. And I think that's the role of a good therapist, and sometimes I personally needed that. I needed to do that. Because it won't always happen through turning, and I've seen some people use turning to bury what happened earlier in their life. Trauma, by its very nature, is very chaotic, and it will need a skilled therapist to work through that on a one-to-one. That's my experience.
I have got another diagram for you I'd drawn today on a big bit of paper, but I left it at home. And what it is, it's something Ken Wilber refers to, which he calls lines and levels.
Yay.
And what it is, you have to visualize this diagram lying sort of upwards, and there are all these developmental lines that go up through the levels, and there are lots and lots of them, and each of us are a bit like a sort of graph, and we're all different graphs, and we've all got these different developmental lines that go up through the different levels, And for instance, with me, if there's a textile designing line, it's really highly developed and right up the top somewhere. But on the higher mathematics, I'm probably down at about 5 years old somewhere, or astrophysics even younger. And all of us are like that, so we like these graphs, and it's a nice model because it helps explain a lot of things. How with gurus, you get quite a lot of gurus who are very high up. Their spiritual level is sort of right up here somewhere, but their psychosexual level is down at about 7 years old, and that's a very classic phenomena. So it helps explain a lot of the incongruities you find in people and in teachers. And in some systems, I would say the Gurdjieff teaching was one of them. The idea was to try and bring all the levels up sort of the same. So if you were no good at mathematics, then you had to work and do lots of mathematics, which doesn't appeal to people like me. Whereas in the top-down models and the Advaita tradition, you go for self-realization not by trying to get good at the things that you're no good at, but by developing the things that you're really good at. So you serve the Absolute, or you find your bliss by developing the things which bring you great joy and which you have great passion about. And Joseph Campbell says, you enter the forest at the darkest point, where there is no path. Where there's a way or path, it's someone else's path. Each human being is a unique phenomena. The idea is to find your own pathway to bliss. And Dr. Old says, there is something in each person which is better than it is in anybody else. We have to be true to this. We have to go for self-realization from this. So we have to know ourselves. Each person has a strength or a skill or a beauty, something which has no equal anywhere else. And from this we'll succeed in self-realization. And Joseph Campbell says, in fact, someone asked him, do you ever have this sense when you are following your bliss, as I have at moments, of being helped by hidden hands? And Joseph Campbell said, all the time, it is miraculous. I even have a superstition that has grown on me as a result of invisible hands coming all the time. Namely, that if you do follow your bliss, you put yourself on a kind of track that has been there all the while waiting for you, and the life that you ought to be living is the one you are living. When you can see that, you begin to meet people who are in the field of your bliss, and they open the doors to you. I say follow your bliss and don't be afraid, and doors will open where you didn't know they were going to be. I adore that. Follow your bliss is my motto, thanks to Joseph Campbell. But it's also my experience that if you're able to make your career out of the thing which is your passion, then if you peg away at it long enough, doors open for you where you're not expecting them to be. Then that goes on to the next question I was given, which is from Dina. There you are. Privyet. Can I read your question? Yeah. Dina says, hi Philip, I've been formulating a question on Advaita. I come from a Russian Orthodox background, so I naturally recoiled from it growing up. The for premise turns out to be very close to some of what Advaita teachers say. Take what life gives you and surrender. You do not need to do anything. Even a bad situation is part of your journey. However, some other teachers say that you should follow your bliss. So let's say an individual who's had a very unhealthy lifestyle is told he's about to get diabetes unless he changes his ways. Does he follow his bliss and keep eating cakes? Or does he do the unpleasant thing of changing a habit? I understand that bliss is meant in a deeper sense. I am working with clients that need to make lifestyle changes, but I find myself hard-pressed to truly convince them that these steps are necessary. Does one do something to get out of their predicament or stay with it? A lot of people are unhappy in their jobs. Should they be encouraged to find something that they would prefer, or to stay in the situation? That's a very great question, and it follows on perfectly. First of all, in my understanding, surrender doesn't mean at all that you accept things as they are. If you don't like the situation you're in, you do everything you can to change it, and you exhaust yourself if need be, don't you, Snuffy? Snuffy is looking at the rat now.
I'm scared.
But what not being the doer means, it doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just means that when you act, you know where the doing is really coming from. So when you act, you acknowledge who the true doer is. So you can completely exhaust yourself in your trying to follow your bliss and whatever it is you want in life. And that will happen if that's on your particular life movie anyway. So the action that is needed will arise anyway, because you'll be driven into action by your nature. But if you're in a situation which clearly won't budge, then you do have to accept it and you have to hand over. But do everything you can to change, and they should definitely give up cakes and buns to reverse diabetes. So surrender doesn't mean don't do anything. It just means do everything and then hand over the results and acknowledge who's the real doer behind it all. Is that getting close to it?
So like, don't eat cake, but if you still get diabetes, at least you've given it your... Yeah, you've given it your best. And if you get diabetes, then you'll have to try another method to cure it. So surrender means like the doership, not the actual activity.
Yeah, you're surrendering the idea that it's you as a separate entity doing it. So you're still doing the activity, you're still... If you're unwell, you do what you can to become well again, and you still hand it over and say, thy will be done, but you still, Rumi says, trust in God, but tie the knee of your camel. So you can't trust in God and leave your camel not tied up, or your camel will run away. So, yeah, unless he loves you. And Rumi also says, destiny is not a struggle with endeavour, because destiny has put this endeavour upon you. So what he's saying there is the fact that you're struggling and endeavouring to do things isn't in opposition to the idea of there being a destiny. The destiny has put this endeavour onto you, so part of your destiny is that you're going to struggle and create and do what you can and dance. And so it's a subtle difference. You're not just saying I don't need to do anything. Well, you can if you want, but if it's not on your movie, you won't be able to do that. You could try staying in bed all tomorrow, but you probably won't manage it. something will make you get up out of bed and start dancing in life. So the actual surrender is handing over the sense of doership, that it's not you as a separate entity who's doing the dancing. But if you go far enough back, the dancing is all being done by the oneness. But you can come in at any point in that, and down here you can say, yes, I'm completely responsible and I'm doing it all. And then you go up here and you hand over to something much bigger as well. So with your patients, your clients, get them to make all the efforts that are necessary and not to accept things if they don't like them or they're making them unhappy. There's the other good parable about the two frogs who fall into a bowl of milk. And one of the frogs is very lazy and he says, we're lost. And he sinks to the bottom and drowns. But the other frog goes on kicking and kicking and kicking until eventually the milk turns into butter and out he hops. That's what life's like. You keep falling into bowls of milk. Don't you, Snuffy?
I guess I'm struggling to take the lazy frogs and encourage them to make that butter and then...
Yeah. You have to be able to live with what's known as the both and. So you can live in your mind, you can have two apparently contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time and there's no conflict.
I think the attachment to the butter in that analogy is also potentially part of the problem. If you try and encourage people to live healthier lives, to save money, to eat less cake, you're actually becoming attached to the butter in that story. The point is to leap out altogether, not to kind of enjoy the butter under your feet.
No, I have to make them not get diabetes.
That's like focusing on the sort of eternal result.
Yeah.
The pure result is the self-realization and control. Whether they get diabetes or not is the realization that comes with that state change. The transpersonal effects of not being addicted to eating lots of cake. It could be anything, but the point is addiction.
Oh, I get it.
If you focus a lot on cake things, it's about control and self-realization rather than actually diabetes itself. If they get diabetes, with your help or not, it's if they grow through that process, that's a good thing.
Can you raise your voice, please, a bit?
Sorry.
Start from the beginning.
Cake and butter. Yeah. More. Puyan, you were going to say something. You got a
I
question.
just had a question from last week. I remember you said that you shouldn't go to trance when you're turning.
Oh, yeah.
I understood that as a ceremony because you need to be aware of
Yeah.
your surrounding and everything. That's completely understandable. But at the same time, the whole notion of, because what we're learning here is intellectual understanding, and without the deeper experience, personal experience, it's kind of meaningless unless you've actually experienced the oneness within yourself.
Yeah.
You're only like repeating what you've heard.
Yeah.
And I think even Rumi, when he was giving out all of his amazing poems, it was like turning, it goes to trance for hours and hours. People were just writing as he was just, this was coming out of him, you know, because he was just channeling all this information from the divine itself. So the trance experience is actually one of the important personal experiences. I wanted to know what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that trance is where Rumi went.
Because they were, well, the stories I've heard is that they were sitting and a lot of music and dancing, and he was turning for a very long time, and then he would start just giving out these poems at some point. And in the Sufi tradition where I come from, trance is a big part of the whole thing.
Say that. There is a sect that.
So it's all about going to that trance for this kind of sect. They sit around and they go to trance, and what they try to do is to experience that oneness and then embody it in their life.
Yeah. With our Mevlevi practice, as we've been taught it, it's definitely not about trance. So the ceremony is about becoming totally still and very wide awake and very aware of what's going on around you. And my experience of being in the ceremony for about 30 years is at the end of it you've got this amazing, it's just like this stillness which is so still it roars like a lion. It's this profound stillness out of which things emerge. And talking as a professional artist, and I've got quite a large output, ideas just come, inspiration comes right through me. It's nothing to do with me as an individual, what I paint. I paint the thing and then I think, oh my God, that's good, where did that come from? But I'm not in a trance at all. And I suspect Rumi also hadn't gone into a sort of another world like a Mongolian or Tibetan shaman where they start having a god speaking through from a particular deity. It's like your consciousness goes back right into the source, which is the source of everything. So all the inspiration just flows through you like a vehicle, and you're busy. If you're a writer, you quickly write it down very quickly, or if there's someone around you, you speak it out to them, as Rumi was doing, and they write it down. So it's like you've become such a transparent vehicle for consciousness, but all this great inspiration is flowing through you. In my case, my mind-body vehicle is programmed to paint things, but if I was a poet or a musician, it would be coming out in other ways. And I, just going on my own experience, I would think that's where great inspiration comes from. That's where everything comes from. Everything is coming from that one source. With the trance, as I know it, in particularly Tibetan shamans, in Tibetan villages, they normally have one particular shaman who goes into a trance, and they go through a particular ritual, and there's particular music, and often their bodies will get much bigger and they take on the appearance of the deity which they're channeling, and then they'll give they'll tell things about the future and how the harvest is going to be. But fine, great, that goes on within the movie and it's fine, but it's not what we're doing within our Mevlevi tradition. But I'm sure there are other Sufi traditions where it is about trance, and that's relevant within those traditions.
But what I mean by trance is more like you getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
It's like you're no longer there. And a lot of times that I've experienced it's not such something like out there. It's just that you are no longer yourself.
Yeah.
You don't identify with you as. And sometimes when you're playing, like let's say you're playing an instrument.
Yeah.
And at some point you realize who's playing?
Yeah.
Where was I? And that's what I'm calling like a trance state, which is you're no longer there.
Yeah. That happens when you're turning. You're being turned. Who's dancing? That's just a realization of your natural state. Because all the time it's not you who's dancing, it's not you who's talking. So in a way it's a linguistic thing. Because with the Tibetan and Mongolian shamans, they go unconscious, then they wake up in the trance state, and when they come back again, they know nothing, absolutely nothing of what's gone on. It's like they've been asleep. Whereas in the turning and poetry writing and painting, you are still conscious, but you're aware that it's not you who's doing the doing. It's all just flowing straight through you.
So rather you have clarity. You still have clarity.
You have clarity. Yeah.
And there's a trance. That's trance. Assume you don't. With trance, you don't have clarity. You kind of give yourself away. Is it? I don't know.
I don't know, but only just in the examples from Tibet and Mongolia, is consciousness is lost, and the individual has no memory afterwards of what went on or what they said. With turning and painting and poetry and stuff, you remain conscious, but as in my example of a painting, you're aware that everything is flowing through you as a vehicle of consciousness, which is what the Mevlevi posture symbolises. But it could just be a question of words.
It strikes me that trance also implies some form of invocation, and not necessarily invocation from the divine source, but something an intermediary.
Experience.
Whatever.
Well, that's what they believe.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Can I ask you what is your thoughts on ayahuasca in South America?
I've never ever taken it.
Because back to what when you were explaining about Karen's question about psychotherapy, I was thinking that that's a good tool actually to dive deep into. But it can be.
It's not a good mix with turning. We had a turner do it.
No.
He didn't look too good.
When he was
he didn't turn
why?
He didn't take ayahuasca before turning, but he was a regular user of ayahuasca, and I think
It was leading to paranoia.
yeah, it was leading to paranoia.
I wouldn't do that.
And he didn't look good.
Personally, I wouldn't. Me personally, I've never even smoked a joint, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. And I was a hippie.
Oh, it's not a drug. It's medicine.
But my watching it with this one turner, who I knew was a regular user, there was definitely an increase in paranoia I could see as a side effect.
Yeah, because I don't believe actually in taking it regularly.
Yeah.
I don't see the point. You just.
I'm sure in South America, in the ceremony with the right rituals, it's probably a great thing.
Because it helped a lot of people with addictions, you know.
Yeah.
Like, even cancer. It's really, it's just facing your fears. You know,
Yeah.
It's more on,
I'm not probably the right person to ask.
we should go together.
Do it upstairs.
We should all go.
No, I'm not into that much. Sorry.
Any more questions?
Is it? I think the way I understood it when you explained it like this in my training, and now the way I'm understanding it, is that it's something to do with states and stages, which I really loved about being here, and I don't think that's why I don't think I can be anywhere else and enjoy this as much. Is that it's not what I'm understanding is that it's not about state chasing. It's about, this is a ritual and it happens all the time, and there is stages that we are growing up and waking up to in the Wilbur model, and that this place is holding it and that it's carrying forward, something like that. But that's been my feeling about it.
Dr. Rolls wanted this house to be the sort of place and the sort of atmosphere that when you were ripe for something to happen, some sort of insight, some sort of breakthrough, this would be the right type of supportive community and atmosphere for it to happen. And with, as I've often mentioned, with states, and Rumi mentions it, it's not really about states, it's about noticing your identity as that part of you that witnesses the states. So you are the great stillness. States will come and go. Trance state, ayahuasca, ecstasy, they all come and go. But behind that there's a great stillness which doesn't change and which quietly just witnesses the changing states. And that's really what we're about, is noticing your identity as that which doesn't change. And there's a special request by Woolley. Here it is again. And this is by Sayyid Nizamoglu from the 16th century. And it's called The Path of Amazement. I cannot say who it is I am. I am amazed, I am amazed. I cannot call this self myself. I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is in my eyes seeing? Who is in my heart enduring? Who is inhaling and exhaling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is speaking with my tongue? Who is listening with my ears? Who is understanding with my mind? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is stepping with these feet? Who is tasting with my mouth? Who is chewing and who swallowing? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who holds these riches in his hand? Who is the one throwing them away? Who is buying and who selling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Why is there life coursing below my skin? Why are my eyes bloodshot from crying? Why this religion? Why this faith? I am amazed, I am amazed. O Sayyid Nizamoglu, hear this. Everything comes from the One. Abandon yourself to this mighty beauty. I am amazed, I am amazed. Do you want to go home there? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you on Thursday.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell our guests.